On a Monday in May 2025, the assembly line at Ford's Chicago plant stopped. Not a strike, not a fire, not a chip shortage. The factory that builds the Explorer had run out of magnets. Follow that shortage upstream, past the motor supplier, past the magnet press in Asia, past the chemical plant that separates the metals, and the trail ends somewhere nobody in Detroit had ever put on a risk map. Two towns in the mountains of northern Myanmar. No paved highway, no functioning state. Since October 2024, held by a rebel army, every electric car on Earth, every large wind turbine, and the control surfaces of every advanced fighter jet depend on a few percent of a metal that mostly comes out of those hills. And there is a date on the calendar. On the 10th of November 2026, a one-year truce expires, and the export controls that stop Ford's line switch back on automatically. This is the story of why nobody can fix it before then, and of the mistake everyone makes about where the choke point actually is. Start with the object at the center of it. It is a magnet, a neodymium magnet, nickel-plated, usually smaller than a deck of cards, and the strongest permanent magnet humanity knows how to make. It was invented in 1982, twice, independently, in a General Motors laboratory in Michigan, and at Sumitomo in Japan, within months of each other. Pack a few kilograms of them into a rotor, and you get an electric motor with roughly twice the torque for its weight of anything else available. That is why an electric car accelerates the way it does. It is also why these magnets sit inside wind turbines, hard drives, drone motors, missile fin actuators, and the flight controls of an F-35. But there is a flaw written into the alloy. Neodymium iron boron loses its grip on its own magnetism when it gets hot. Past roughly 100 degrees Celsius, its resistance to demagnetization starts falling away fast. In a traction motor hauling a car up a mountain pass in summer, runs at 150, 180 degrees. Cross that line and the magnet does not fail loudly. It quietly stops being a magnet, permanently. The fix, found in the 80s, is to swap a small fraction of the neodymium atoms for a heavier cousin, dysprosium, or its rarer neighbor, terbium. Between 6 and 10% by weight in a typical automotive magnet. That is the whole intervention. A few percent of a gray metal almost nobody outside the industry can name, and the motor survives August, which is where it gets strange. Neodymium is not rare at all. There is more of it in the Earth's crust than there is lead. Dysprosium and terbium are not scarce either. They are in the ground on every continent. So why does the entire planet buy them from one place? The answer is not where the atoms are. It is what they are stuck to. In most of the world, heavy rare earths sit locked inside hard minerals, bastnasite, monazite, xenotime, crystals that hold them in a tight lattice. Getting them out means crushing rock, roasting it in concentrated acid, and then pushing the result through hundreds of stages of solvent extraction. Because the rare earths are chemically almost identical to one another and refuse to separate cleanly. It works. It is enormously expensive, and it leaves behind radioactive thorium that somebody has to store forever. Then there is the exception. In one narrow band of the world, hot, wet, sitting on ancient granite, millions of years of rain do the crushing for you. The granite rots in place into a deep clay. The rare earths wash out of the shattered crystals and cling to the surfaces of the clay particles, held by nothing stronger than an electrical charge, which means you can rinse them off, drill a shallow hole, pour in a solution of ammonium sulfate, ordinary fertilizer salt, and the ammonium ions trade places with the rare earth ions. The metal comes down the hillside dissolved in the runoff. No crushing, no roasting, no furnace, ambient temperature. These are called ion adsorption clays, and they are the reason heavy rare earths are affordable at all. They are also spectacularly unevenly distributed because the climate and the bedrock both have to line up. Where they do, southern China and the hills running across the border into northern Myanmar, the deposits are individually small, low-grade, and almost unbelievably cheap to work. Everywhere else on Earth, heavy rare earths remain a chemistry problem nobody has solved profitably. So the choke point was never a mine, it was a climate band. And the last thing you would expect is that the country sitting on top of it would push the digging across its own border. For most of the 20th century, none of this was China's. In 1949, two prospectors hunting uranium in the Mojave Desert ran a Geiger counter over an outcrop at a place called Mountain Pass, California, and got a reading. It was not uranium, it was bastnasite, the richest rare earth deposit anyone had ever found. For the next 30 years, Mountain Pass supplied most of the world. The europium that made the color red on every color television came out of that pit. What ended it was not competition, it was a pipeline. The mine's wastewater ran 14 miles across the desert to evaporation ponds on the Ivanpah Dry Lake. Between 1984 and 1998, that pipeline ruptured at least 60 times, spilling more than 1 million gallons of salt water carrying radioactive thorium onto the desert floor. Fines, consent decrees, the pipeline shut down, and in 2002, the separation plant stopped for good. America walked out of an industry it had invented. Meanwhile, in 1969, a geologist in Jiangxi province had found the first ion adsorption clay deposit. Through the 80s and 90s, Chinese operators industrialized the leaching process, and the world price of heavy rare earths fell through the floor. In 1992, on a tour of the South, Deng Xiaoping delivered the sentence that has been quoted in every briefing on this subject since: "The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths." It reads like a boast. It was closer to a weather report. The West got exactly one warning, and it was loud. In September 2010, a Chinese trawler captain collided with Japanese Coast Guard vessels near the Senkaku Islands and was arrested. Within days, rare earth shipments to Japan dried up. Prices went vertical. Washington and Brussels wrote strategy papers. Investors poured money into a revived Mountain Pass, which listed on the stock market, and filed for bankruptcy 5 years later when prices came back down. The mine was bought out of Chapter 11 in 2017. For years afterwards, it dug ore in California and shipped the concentrate to China to be separated because separation was the one part nobody in America had rebuilt. And then China did something almost nobody outside the industry registered. From around 2016, Beijing started enforcing environmental law on its own clay hills. The leaching had stripped the topsoil off entire mountainsides and turned the streams the color of milk. Quotas came in. Illegal operations were shut. Demand did not fall. The mining simply walked over the border into the Kachin Hills of northern Myanmar, the same clays under the same rain, where after the coup of 2021, there was nobody left to enforce anything at all. By the middle of this decade, roughly 2/3 of the dysprosium and terbium moving through Chinese separation plants was coming out of a war zone. There were 2 warnings before the line in Chicago stopped. Both recent, both ignored. Warning 1, October 2024. The Kachin Independence Army, an ethnic armed group that has been fighting the Burmese state on and off since 1961, took the towns of Chipwe and Pangwa. With them came the mines. Thousands of leaching pools cut into the hillsides, worked by migrant labor for around $800 a month, taxed by whoever holds the ground, an estimated $200 million a year. Exports across the border stopped for weeks. Myanmar's output for the year fell from a peak of about 43,000 tons to 31. Dysprosium ticked upward, then settled. Not one car maker in Detroit or Wolfsburg changed a purchasing decision. Warning 2, the 4th of April, 2025. China placed export controls on 7 heavy rare earths and, this was the part that mattered, on the finished magnets themselves. Every shipment now needed an individual license, reviewed for national security. Approvals slowed to almost nothing through April and May. Ford's Chicago plant went dark for a week. Germany's automotive lobby warned that production lines across the country were days away from stopping. Purchasing managers who had never heard the word dysprosium began finding out where their magnets came from. In June, licenses were granted to the suppliers of the 3 big American car makers, valid for 6 months. Then in October 2025, Beijing widened the rules to cover every heavy rare earth and added a clause with real teeth. Any product made anywhere in the world containing more than a trace of Chinese origin rare earth would need a Chinese license to move. 3 weeks later at a summit, the whole package was suspended, not canceled, suspended for 1 year. That year ends on the 10th of November, 2026. Which brings us to now. Even with the controls paused, the market never went back to normal. Dysprosium oxide, which spent years trading around $200 a kilogram, was above $317 this spring. The neodymium-praseodymium alloy that goes into the same magnets more than doubled in the first 3 months of 2026 alone. Analysts covering the sector expect the bottleneck to hold through this year and probably well past it. The obvious response is to build, and everyone is building. Australia has heavy separation capacity running in Malaysia. The United States has put public money and a guaranteed floor price under a magnet plant in Texas, with a national stockpile behind it. There are projects racing forward in Brazil, in Tanzania, in Canada. None of it closes this particular gap on this particular timetable. A separation plant is a chemistry facility with hundreds of stages of mixer settlers, and it takes years to design, permit, and build, then years more to actually tune, because the people who know how to run one learned it in Jiangxi. A magnet plant needs the separated oxides to exist before it can press anything. And most of the deposits being permitted outside Asia are hard rock, which means the expensive route, crushing, roasting, acid, and thorium that somebody has to bury. The entire point of the ion adsorption clays was that they let you skip all of that, and the clays are where the weather put them. Step back, and the shape of this is familiar. In 2022, it was neon, half the world's supply from 2 Ukrainian steelworks exposed by a war. In 2024, it was ultra-pure quartz, 9/10 of the world from one Appalachian town exposed by a hurricane. This year it was helium, 1/3 of the world from one industrial park in the Gulf exposed by a missile strike. Magnets are the fourth, and they are the first one nobody can call an accident. Neon quartz and helium were choke points the world backed into without noticing. This one was constructed. Somebody in Jiangxi worked out how to rinse a hillside. Somebody in Beijing wrote the quotas, then the licenses, then the clause that reaches into other countries' factories, and somebody in Washington and somebody in Brussels spent 30 years signing off on every decision that made it cheaper to let all of it happen somewhere else. The scar of that pipeline is still visible on the Avanpa Dry Lake, if you know where to look. 14 miles of line across the desert, marking the year America decided this particular kind of dirty work was not worth doing at home. 7,000 miles away, ammonium sulfate is still running off a hillside in Kachin State into streams that feed the Irrawaddy. And the people living downstream do not have the option of exporting the problem to anybody. The same chemistry, the same stripped hillside, 2 different answers about who pays for it. None of that changes before the 10th of November. What changes on that date is only whether the world gets told again, in writing with a license requirement attached, what it already found out on a Monday in May on a factory floor in Chicago. This is the 4th time in 4 years that the world's most advanced industries were stopped by a material almost nobody had heard of. The other 3, the neon, the quartz, and the helium, are on screen now. If these are the stories you came here for, subscribe. More files are on the way.